Hey there.
Hey Thomas, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. It's an honor to have you with us on Metalwani today.
Thank you very much.
Well, come on, love. Tell us about the dramatic journey of Thomas Lang.
I started playing at the age of 5
Mm-hmm.
in Austria, where I grew up. Um, my early inspirations were Buddy Rich and Ringo Starr equally,
Uh-huh.
uh, and um, and then Billy Cobham, Stuart Copeland, Vinnie Colaiuta, Terry Bozzio, all the great drummers from that period.
Right.
A lot of like 70s and 80s British rock drummers were a huge inspiration, and I was very lucky to have lessons
Mm-hmm.
right away from the age of 5 when I first started playing.
That's great.
Um, I had fantastic lessons with a great teacher in Austria,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then I stayed with many different teachers until I started to attend the Conservatory of Music in Vienna
Uh-huh.
and also the Music Academy. And I studied jazz and classical on both institutions.
Mm-hmm.
And I started working professionally um, at the age of 18. As soon as I finished high school,
Uh-huh.
I graduated from high school and also from the conservatory at the same time because I entered the conservatory very young at 15.
Wow.
She's at 13 for the first time, and then finished at 18 and went on to work internationally from then on. Went on a world tour pretty much right a week after I graduated from high school.
And you're here as one of the world's best drummer.
Well, that's what they say.
Now, they don't say, they actually mean it because that's what the fact is.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Well, what was the big, breakthrough in your career?
Um, I'm still waiting for that.
Okay.
No, I mean, it was, I guess, I was very lucky in the very beginning when I started working pretty much right out of high school. Um, I was very lucky to get connected to some great musicians in Austria who were touring nationally and internationally.
Mm-hmm.
So, and for me, that was a great chance. I was working with Falco, who was a huge star at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He was from Vienna. He was a friend of mine, and he had worldwide hits in the 80s
Uh-huh.
when I first started working with him. So I kind of entered the music scene at the very top.
Right.
When I first started touring out of high school, it was a world tour with Falco, who was number one at the time in the U.S., and the album was number one for 4 months here in the U.S. So it was a
Wow.
huge success, exactly. And we toured all over the world. So I guess that was my big break, and sort of the moment that defined pretty much the rest of my career, because through him and through those tours and albums I did with him,
Mm-hmm.
I met a lot of other people. I connected with producers. I connected with a lot of musicians.
Wow. That's really amazing. Now, you're known to have you have your own sound when it comes to your own signature set of cymbals and other products. So, I
Yes.
mean, I mean, your playing style is also hybrid. So, how does it help you create your own sound?
Well, creative vision, something very unique. And in order to translate your sort of sonic and creative vision onto an instrument,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you 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 need specific um, sounds to really create in a way that is appropriate in
Uh-huh.
regards to your vision, if you know what I mean. You can't just always, you sometimes push boundaries by changing your gear, your instrument, by redesigning some elements of your instrument to really suit your creative vision perfectly. So
True.
in my case, my cymbals, for example, um, the cymbals are such a huge part of your sound as a
Right.
drummer
True.
that, they create a lot of character in your playing, and the soundscape and the character of your cymbals will some define you as a player also. And
Absolutely.
so I started very early to experiment with designs And my sticks, for example, who are tailor-made for my style of playing and
Right.
size of hands and the style of music I play. And my cymbals and in conjunction with the cymbals, the sticks work well on those cymbals, and vice versa. So it's sort of a, the combination that matters, not just the cymbals, but that in conjunction with the type of drums I play, the sizes of sticks, the sizes of cymbals, and so on.
Absolutely.
So for me, it's a very important aspect of what we do, and my sound not only comes, of course, from my playing alone, but also from some of the stuff that I design.
That's really awesome. We know that most of the drummers use different instruments like, hi-hat, cymbals, toms, and other stuff with different sounds and picks. Now, you took that concept on a higher level by translating it to the foot department.
Yes.
So, how did you learn to modulate your feet so quickly between, the n number of pedals you're using?
Well, it's a good question. This whole thing, I started playing double bass drums by accident, basically, by chance. It wasn't, when I first started playing double bass drum, wasn't sort of standard practice, like it is today. And I had a Remo practice kit as a young kid. I mean, I practiced on acoustic drums as well, but I also had this practice kit by Remo, and two of the pads on top of the kit broke.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember or know those old Remo practice kits with tunable drum heads, but two of the top pads broke, and we went back to the store, and the guy said he doesn't have replacement pads, but he has another second kit like that where two pads are missing, so he would just give us the other old kit he's got, and I can replace my broken two pads with the two pads on the other one. But the other kit came with a whole frame which had a second bass drum pad on it too. So I had two frames now and two small little racks of those Remo drum kits with two bass drum pads and four pads on top. So I thought, hey, I have two of those things. Why not get a second pedal and try to use the second bass drum pad? So that's what I did. And I was probably about, I would say, maybe 10 or 12, something around there. And because I was then experimenting with 2 feet on 2 bass drums, or 2 bass pads, basically, and doing that on a practice kit, there was no real sort of drum sound associated to that when I was practicing. It was more like a, sort of that very neutral pad sound when you kick the bass drum pad. And I set up a hi-hat on my left side next to my left bass drum, and I started switching between the two pedals basically very early on, just to get different sounds because the pads don't sound like anything. So sometimes if I wanted to pattern a little better with my left foot, I would switch onto the hi-hat and play it there, and then switch back to the bass drum. And it happened very organically and naturally that I started using sort of multiple, in the same way that I use multiple sounds on top of my kit, on top of it, I have tom-toms and cymbals and snare drums and cowbells. And I just started looking at the possibilities with my feet the same way, because I was a kid, and I had a very playful approach. So for me, it seemed just natural that one would also, use the same concepts for foot orchestrations that you would use for hand orchestrations. And that's how it all started. And a few years later, when I would afford more pedals and more sounds, and when I had my first endorsement and sponsorships companies, I was able to set up really sort of specific sounds and pedals, and I started to develop those multi-pedal orchestrations and more sort of melodic playing with my feet a lot more.
Wow.
And and I think that today, that whole thing in the foot department, playing multi-pedal orchestrations and more sort of complex patterns with your feet, that is to a high degree sort of the cutting edge of modern drumming.
Wow. Well, you're an extremely versatile drummer that everybody knows, and I know you're a fan of electronic drums as well. So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
could you tell me about your, the very first experience with the electronic drum kits?
My very first experience was pretty much right away early in my career when I literally started touring internationally and working professionally, because with Falco
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the other artists at the time in the 80s, um, the use of electronic drums was not only sort of widespread and common, but also necessary. The
Uh-huh.
80s, that's when it all happened, when Simmons first built their electronic drums and when
Right.
Dynacord released their drum sets. And I had to play the sounds that were on the records and
Right.
not simulate them with acoustic sounds, but I had to recreate them perfectly with the electronic sounds, because those were such significant sounds and so important for the compositions at the
Right.
time and for the general soundscape of those songs. So I used electronics pretty much right away when I started working in the mid to late 80s.
Mm-hmm.
I had an SDX Simmons kit. I had an Add2 Dynacord kit,
Mm-hmm.
and I incorporated those electronic components into my acoustic setups and always played hybrid kits at the time. I never just played electronic kits exclusively,
Okay.
but I added pads and created hybrid kits from the very early days on. And then in 1997, when Roland released
Roland
their
came, right.
exactly when they released their first V-drum kit in 97, I became an endorser right away, because for the first time, it was easy to modify sounds, to program the module. Everything, it was in one box. It was easy to trigger from the Roland brain
Right.
to trigger external sounds, and the collections of sounds were fantastic already inside the module. So you didn't have to do much to use or to get pretty much any sound you wanted. It was all in
Right.
one box. Whereas before, I had to schlep racks and racks of samplers and sounds and mixers and
True.
interfaces with me to create those sounds. So in '97, I became a Roland endorser, and I've been with them ever since.
That's great.
And absolutely. I'm lucky enough to be able to contribute a little bit to design ideas and give them some input and feedback in regards to research and development of the stuff.
Right.
And so it's been a wonderful and very, very, fruitful and relationship between me and Roland.
That's great. Now, I'm a drummer too, and I have the electronic drum kit which is made by Yamaha. So I have the Yamaha DT Explorer, and
Yeah.
the sensitivity and the feel and the response of the pads is obviously different when I compare it with the acoustic kit.
Of course.
Especially when I play double bass, it's tough to maintain it for a longer duration. I mean, now since you have an experience of playing on electric kits for more than 2 decades, how do you manage to have an efficient control over different drum setups?
You know what? You're absolutely right. That the response on electronic kit, whichever brand it is a little bit different from an acoustic kit, of
Right.
course. But then so are the playing surfaces on an acoustic kit. They're all different. A low floor tom has a completely different response from a hi-hat,
Right.
and a snare drum has a very different response from a ride cymbal. So you always adjust your playing according to the surface that you're playing on, and you adjust your techniques a little bit according to the instrument that you're playing. And for me, it's the same thing with the electronic drums. When I'm on the kit, within literally like 2 seconds, when I start playing, I can feel the response,
Uh-huh.
and I can adjust my technique in a split second to make it work on whichever surface I'm playing.
Right.
I try not to overthink it, and
Uh-huh.
I try not to sort of get paranoid about responses and rebound, etc. And I just treat it like any other drum set, basically. I play it with the same intensity, with the same attitude,
Okay.
and with the same energy, and also aggression sometimes. And when I do that, I feel like um, I'm I'm simply just playing another set of drums,
Uh-huh.
and I'm completely ignoring any sort of subtle differences in response. And that works for me personally the best. Not to overthink it and to just approach it like any other kid.
Uh-huh.
And it's some people say that the electronic kit is easy to play because it's more bouncy.
Right.
And I find that I can understand why people say that. I think the cymbals are harder to play on an electronic kit.
Yes.
And I think that some of the drums, yes, maybe a little easier to play, but however, the fact that it is a little bouncier,
Right.
and the fact that, maybe you can play certain things a little faster on the electron than on the acoustic kit, which for me personally does not ring true, but for other people it may. I find, however, that you have to play electronic kits a lot more precisely.
Right.
And an acoustic drum set. An acoustic kit is a lot more forgiving than an electronic kit. The electronic sounds are so direct and so clean and so distinguishable and so clear that everything that you play is being translated, perfectly into the brain.
True.
And you have really absolutely no wiggle room. And because the sounds are so direct and they are often, electronic or synthetic sounds that make you sound more like a machine, you also have to play a lot more precisely. So in a way, it's harder to play than an acoustic kit.
Right. That's true. Now, at the same time, there are drummers, they play on the electronic drum kits, but at the same time, what do you think is the biggest mistake a drummer can make with the electronic drum kits, especially in the studio?
In the studio, well, I think the biggest mistake is to play it not like a drum set, to think that it's a synthesizer that you play with sticks, to change your technique when you're playing it, and to change your attitude when you're playing it. I think that is the biggest mistake. And in the studio, it is also that, to treat it not like a drum set, but to treat it like a synthesizer that you're playing with sticks.
Right.
I think you have to maintain and keep that same attitude, the same aggression, the same energy, and play with the same sort of general, visceral, approach.
Right.
And not change your style or your thinking or attitude simply because you're hearing different sounds or it has a slightly different response. I think that's the most important thing. And in the studio, the drummers, that's one thing. I find that engineers often make mistakes in recording the electronics in the wrong way. They should. In the studio, I like to record multi-track audio outputs plus MIDI on a separate track, so I can change sounds in retrospect. And a lot of engineers, I've seen actually, and this is no joke, I've seen engineers put microphones up to it in the studio. Yeah.
Wow.
I set up my overhead microphones. I'm like, what are you doing? The problems in the studio with electronic they come mainly from the engineer's side, from the recording side, not so much from the playing aspect.
Right, that's true. Now you have your own set of signature sticks as well. So like you play on the acoustic kit as well as the electric kit, and like you said, you combine them into a one customized drum kit. So do you use different sticks when you play on the electronic kit?
No, I used my stick, my Thomas Lang signature model stick for everything that I do. Electronic or acoustic, it's always the same stick.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, let's talk about your playing. Your solo records like Mediator or Save the Robots clearly represent your versatility in terms of playing.
Yes.
At the same time, which recorded piece of work you feel represents your style and is technically very complex?
I would say it is my band STORK.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you know those albums, but from the more recent releases, it would be definitely STORK, and another project that I released this year called Humaflex.
It's great.
Yeah, I don't know if STORK is now a quartet. It used to be a trio, which is a sort of a math metal instrumental power trio featuring Shane Gibson on guitar, who used to play guitar in the band Korn. And now we have also a singer in the band. Her name is Vitek. She's a fantastic female metal singer. And Shane on guitar and Kelly Lemieux on bass, who I worked with Paul Gilbert. We recorded with Paul together and we toured together with Paul. And Kelly is also the bass player in a band called Buck Cherry and Goldfinger.
Right.
And we recorded an album last year, which is coming out now, actually. So this is worth talking about, which is called Broken Pieces. And that album, style-wise, I write all the music, and it kind of reflects me as a writer in the heavy sort of department, as well as a drummer, of course. And it is very current. And another project that I released this year called Humaflex, which is a collaboration with a guitar player named Conrad Schrenk, is also an album that I could recommend because it's very current, and it features also my writing and production work as well as my playing. So musically, I feel that those are some albums, some of many that I record every year, but that reflect my playing, my attitude, my writing very well.
Right. That's really amazing. Now, since you mentioned about the math metal, I mean, you must be aware that these days it's been more like a genre called gent. You might have heard about that. So, what's your take on that sort of music? I mean, all of a sudden there's been a huge rush of bands, and every new band wants to play gent.
Well, Stork's first album qualifies as gent, in fact, and it's a self-titled album, Stork. You can find it online, or if you go to www.musomart.com or Muso Entertainment. Yeah, Muso is my record. It's MUSO.
Yeah,
and
got
if
it.
You go to, Muso Entertainment, you'll find Muso Mart as well. And you can see all those albums there. You can also get them on iTunes and what have you. But if you look at the first Stork album, that is strictly a gent album. And I like this style of music as long as it is not too overly intellectual. There's the one downfall with this kind of music is that it's too brainy sometimes.
Everybody tries to make it extremely complex and try to outdo each other and prove that they can be technically very strong.
Yes, absolutely, and which is fine because that is basically that's big part of is improvisational music or music in general. You had the same thing in bebop.
Right.
When Charlie Parker, played the tunes, it was all about who can solo faster, more, and play more complex sort of lines over more complex chords.
Right.
So you always had that attitude in instrumental music to try to outshine other musicians and compete in a certain way.
True.
And which is fine, but that is obviously not music for the masses. It's obviously not music for a wider audience. It's strictly music for musicians, which is necessary to have to keep people inspired and motivated to grow and learn and develop. However, I do think that it gets old very, very quickly as well. It's not something that a wider
remains
audience,
forever.
Yes, it's not something that, exactly, remains forever, that has much sort of commercial impact, and also it's not music for girls at all. So you eliminate pretty much 50% of your audience immediately if you play this kind of music. It's strictly for guys and strictly for guys who are musicians, basically.
Right.
So, and then there are some hybrid bands that have also slightly more commercial, slightly more elements to their music, like Periphery or Animals as Leaders, bands like that. But they still don't have huge commercial success. It is strictly also more for musicians and a very elite group of people who listen to this like super complex music.
True.
However, as a musician, as somebody who wants to grow and stay inspired, I have to say, of course, I like it. I find it inspiring to listen to, and I write this kind of music and play it as well because it is fun to play.
Right.
So for me as an active musician, of course, I have to admit I enjoy playing it, enjoy writing this style of music as well. And, proof for that, of course, is my band Stork. And we did this first album and we had great reviews, and in that sort of genre of gent and math metal.
Right.
But however, we now changed and got a singer into the band because we want to be a little more commercial, because we want to be a little more approachable for a larger audience.
From the last 3 decades, you have worked with so many artists throughout your career. At the same time, I'm sure there must have been certain scenarios where, some, bunch of musicians would have gathered together and tried to make some music. Are there any demos left, during those sessions that, that has not seen the light yet?
Of course, it happens all the time, and more often than you would like. Of course, this happens for various reasons, for budget reasons, or personal conflicts, or bad chemistry, whatever it is. But of course, it happens all the time, and in fact, some of the greatest stuff I find that I've written or recorded never saw the light of day, unfortunately.
Whoa.
Also, I worked with some, major artists that then decided that they want to change their musical style, or they want to reunite with former band members in the middle of a production and things like that. So, yes, unfortunately, that happens all the time. I had a fantastic project called Terabyte a few years ago with Nick Vigilio, who's a great friend of mine and also a great drummer and also amazing singer. And we made a record which I think is fantastic, which unfortunately never saw the light of day because we had, problems with a third-party sort of investor in the project who posted the music online before it was officially released and stuff like that. So we had to pull it, and, there are, unfortunately, those sort of incidents and cases where there are legal problems or publishing right problems, internal conflicts of some kind, unfortunately. But yeah, that happens, and you have to learn to deal with it. Although it's very disappointing, sometimes you have to just close the case, move on, and hope for the best or for better next time.
A few years back, you gave an audition for Dream Theater. You said that you would like to settle down as as a part of a member, like you would like to settle down to be a part of a band. So do you still prefer to be a solo artist, or like you feel like someday down the line I would prefer to settle down and be part of a band?
Always. And, this was, for me, always the reason why I started playing. I always wanted to be in a band. And hence, I always had my own bands, like STORK, for example. And before STORK, I had Terabyte. And before Terabyte, I had Save the Robots and so on. So I always had my own groups and my own bands with my friends and musicians who I respect and people who I like to work with. And it's the same now. I mean, STORK is my band. That is my focus. And I see myself much more as a band musician and team player than a solo artist. And in fact, the solo work that I do is mainly drum related. I do sort of solo performances as a drummer, and I do, I play at drum festivals by myself, and I do like drum clinics where I play by myself. But this is just a small sideline of what I do. I look at myself primarily as a band musician and team player, and then in addition to that, as a writer and producer of music. Because I have studios here in Los Angeles, and I write and produce music for other artists and for media, for television and computer games and things like that. So I don't really see myself as a solo artist per se, anyways. And my heart and my interest is definitely in bands and in being in a band and being part of a family. And that is the reason why I went to the audition also, because it seemed like an interesting and relevant opportunity, so I wanted to check it out.
Right, that's really amazing. Now, you tour a lot to different countries every year, be it the clinics or be it the different, various countries you visit and, conduct classes. How do you prepare for tours and sessions? I mean, it must be like on road for 4 months, 5 months, and how do you basically prepare yourself for tours as well as sessions in studios?
Well, that's a good question. I've done it for so many years that it doesn't take much preparation.
Right.
At least not in terms of logistics. I've become very, very good at it, and I've become very efficient and a very professional globetrotter, Of course, you have to prepare and know what you need to bring. You have to prepare in advance of your schedule very well, and logistically, you have to make sure that you always have the right equipment wherever you go. I work a lot with my sponsors to get everything sorted in advance and get confirmations for all the different equipment in different locations in advance. Mm-hmm. I'm a very good and experienced traveler, so the actual travel aspect of it is as much as I dislike it, it has become routine and something very easy to deal with. The more difficult aspect of doing this is, I have a family, to prepare mentally, to be away for, extended periods of time from my family, and also to prepare my family, my kids, that I'm going to be away again for a while. Right. But having said that, luckily, my kids grew up in this environment, and they grew up getting used to the fact that I may be gone for extended periods of time. So by now, they are also used to it, and they deal with it, and they can live with this and manage this very, very well by now.
That's great. You are a multi-instrumentalist as well, and on tour, have you ever played keyboard or bass guitar or guitars with while some of the member is on the drums?
Absolutely, yes. I do it all the time, in fact. And wow. This year I was on tour with Paul Gilbert for 4 months earlier this year, promoting Paul's new album, Vibrato, which I recorded with him last year. Mm-hmm. And just as an example, in Paul's show I play bass also, in addition to drums. And because Paul likes to play the drums, so we switch instruments, and it's always my favorite part of the show because, I love playing bass, and it gets me to do something else. And I've done that many, many times with many artists on tour, that I switch for, 1 or 2 songs, or sometimes more, 5, 6, 7 songs, or even play half the show on bass, half the show on drums. Mm-hmm. And I also have played guitar on tours with people. I play a little bit of acoustic guitar or guitar. I'm not a great soloist, but I can play rhythm guitar, and I can play, guitar parts very well. Wow. I've played keyboards on tours before. As long as it's not too complex and I don't have to solo or go crazy on keyboard or guitar, I can do it. And bass is always my favorite instrument to play live, other than the drums. I've done tours with singers, songwriters, or pop artists where I played everything: drums, bass, keyboards, guitar, percussion, and I like to do a lot of backing vocals. So I try to get involved wherever I can in any kind of live performance. And that is, for me, the most fun aspect of making music with a band, is to be able to assume different roles and get sort of involved in the playing on different levels, on different instruments, and show your ideas and input in many different ways. That's one of the things I enjoy the most.
What's the plan for the remainder of the year and into 2014 as well?
Well, at the moment, on Monday I'm going to Australia to record an album with an Australian guitar player named Jeremy Barnes, and then I'm doing also boot camps in Melbourne. I had a very successful sort of series of camps in Melbourne last year, so I'm going back this year for more drum camps in Melbourne at the DRUMatic. And then in December, when I'm back here in Los Angeles, I am doing a lot of recording sessions here at my studio. I'm working with people from all over the world who send me files to record on. And I do a lot of session work here in Los Angeles as well. I do a lot of movie trailers and soundtrack recordings. And I write and co-produce and produce music here for video games and for clients who send me sessions, and I track drums here in Los Angeles. So December I'll be busy doing that. I am also very busy at the moment launching the new Stork album, there is an Indiegogo campaign right now to finish or to get some of the funding for radio promotion and tour support for Stork. So if anybody's interested, please go to Indiegogo.com and look for the Stork project called Broken Pieces, which is the album title, the new album.
Right.
And you'll find the campaign there. And we are trying to get the album out by the end of January, so it's very exciting for us. Right. And then next year, I am planning to do more work with Paul Gilbert. I'm planning to go on the road with Stork to promote the album. I have already a lot of session work booked for next year. There's more camps coming up next year. Of course, I'm doing another Big Drum Bonanza next year on the 4th of July weekend, which is our annual weekend for this big drum event here in Los Angeles.
Right.
Lots of amazing guests. I am continuing to work here in my studio writing and producing for other people. I'm finishing an album called Chumash with amazing guests on it, with Luis Conte on it, with Matt Malley from the Counting Crows, amazing trumpet player called Jens Lindemann, and a host of other fantastic musicians. Paul Gilbert is also on that album.
We never had a privilege to see you conduct a clinic in India. We just got an opportunity to catch George Collias last year here. So is it possible to see you on the road and to see you coming to India to conduct a clinic?
I would love to, and I hope that I can make it next year. I had so many requests from India, but I just never had the time in the recent years. But I would absolutely love to. Yes. So I'll definitely keep it on my radar, and I'll try to make it happen for 2014.